Elizabeth Warren has been able to, on the national level, from Congress, take similarly wonky issues and be able to put it into the public consciousness, and in a way that frankly also is relatedly to how much people are focusing on Wall Street even since Occupy. And just to start it off, like what primary points would you start with, saying like, here's what Elizabeth Warren does differently that makes this work so well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, first of all. Elizabeth Warren, also an unusual, you don't have to be so harsh, but you are an unusual person, and then you ended up on Wall Street and still somehow didn't completely lose track of your conscience and got back. And also because it is exactly like Harry's saying, you have these conversations the way normal human beings do. There's such a premium on that now. It used to be that, I mean, if you sort of go way big picture and you roll back time, that human communication was, the conversation was, first of all, itself less informal, but even more important than that, political conversation happened in speeches and through the papers, and it was all, there was an expert class that did that more than we see now. Now what's happened, because video is everywhere, because every one of us has a video camera in our pocket, which was not true even just a couple years ago, that the expectation is, if you are a communicator, that you can communicate this way, and someone can stick a camera in your face and you're going to function as if you were at a dinner party with friends and be able to explain things like a normal person. And so when that actually does happen, as in the case of Alexis or Elizabeth Warren, it is this great find, because there is so much bandwidth for video now, and the amount of people who can actually do these things are relatively rare. So it's fantastic if we can boost that capability a little bit, and that's what we're trying to do at the Franklin Forum, actually, is train folks to be able to communicate with a camera pointed at them the way that they would just explaining something to their friends. Now, Elizabeth Warren comes from the law school context, which I don't know how many of us in here have suffered through that, but it's essentially for people who don't want to deal with numbers, and then they end up, but then they have to do financial stuff, and so she's used to sort of, it's kind of like physics for poets, only it's, you know, numbers for lawyers would be. So she's had a lot of experience with this, and taking that show on the road for the rest of us has obviously been huge. Are we going to play some of the, I don't know if we're going to play, but we've all seen these videos. My favorite will always be the one at the house party where she talks about, I guess it was the inspiration for you to build that, where she talks about, good for you, and you can keep a lot of that money, but guess what? You didn't actually build that all by yourself. There were roads, and there was ports, and there was education, and there was all this other stuff, and that actually does count. Yes, even if privately you think that middle-class people who work for a wage are losers, we're still going to tax you. Anyway, so since she's kind of, I think, in some ways the hook or the inspiration for what we're doing here, I wanted to just make a couple of points quickly and then move on. There'll maybe some Q&A here. The reason that thing is up there in the corner, in case you noticed, there a sort of montage of pictures of Elizabeth, is that when we move to video, one of the things that we need to know is that pictures, you know, the old phrase, right? They're worth 1,000 words. And getting them exactly to tell the same message that we want told with the actual words. We're good at words. Everybody in this room is pretty good at words. Pictures is a little bit, it's not like we don't live them, but it's a medium that we're less familiar with. And so the contrast here, can you go to slideshow view? I don't know if you can go to slideshow view. But the contrast here, and actually, nothing personal against Joe, but I did have this conversation with one of his colleagues. I think, maybe, I don't know if you guys use the top photo, but I know DFA and some other good allies of ours and Huffington Post too, whenever they run a story on Elizabeth Warren, if they don't have a fresh picture of her, the picture of her that most often gets used, not always, but one of the most popular ones is this one where she looks like, you're going to get that one back, we all know the picture. It's, you know, here, let's all do it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, all right. And man, I don't know who's on the business end of that thing, but I'm glad I'm not, because it is seriously, it's like there's like a talon going on, and her face is clearly mad, and she's mid, I don't know what word she's forming there, but it might as well be in the back half of "fuck you," and that image of her if you think about the contrast between that and the images down below, so you have the few harsh ones up there. Oh, hey, who's this? She's fantastic. She is the Midwestern soccer mom who can smile, and even with that smile on her face, can still slice and dice all of the crazy BS that Wall Street et al. Are pulling off. When she's doing it that way, it's actually much easier to swallow. That's the spoonful of sugar that you're seeing here that helps people take in the message without seeing her. And it's particularly hard for women, by the way. It's particularly hard for women to get angry without seeming like a bitch. Yeah. And so she's much, much, much more persuasive this way. And so it's been interesting for me. I really have had just completely unsolicited back and forth with our friends. I bet if you do the A/B testing, and I haven't had the follow-up conversation, it's a great question. Everybody else in this building is talking about A/B testing. I bet if you do the A/B testing, that you might get more clicks and raise more money. Because if you scroll up again, that's how, scrolling up. If you scroll up again, that is how we all feel about what the hell's happening in our country right now. And so that connects with us, the base, the activist class. And that will get, if you feel like that and that connects with you, you're gonna click through, you're gonna share, and you're gonna give money. And that's important, and that's an important role. It's a different role than pushing, yeah, she's actually not gonna run, but pushing Elizabeth out there as a national figure to win over some of the people who are not already in our camp. And it's just important to understand that differentiation and those messages and how that vocabulary is different since we're now using images as a medium.
What's striking about that last statement in terms of this different audiences, what's really interesting is, the activist audience who want to be inspired to go take a specific kind of action or want to be able to mobilize supporters. It's a very different kind of content they're looking for than the average consumer of viral video content, which is a great opportunity to bring Joe into the discussion, considering how Upworthy has just totally changed the game in terms of really systematizing the virality to a science in terms of distributing this broadly meaningful content. And we're talking about Elizabeth Warren, and from our pre-conversations, what's so fascinating is there are specific keys that you kind of look for when you're looking for like potential video to put on Upworthy that she seems to hit on a disproportionate amount of compared to other politicians. And if you just care to describe what you look for in a video that might go viral and then tie it to what she actually does.
Usually we think about emotion 100% of the time, and what becomes viral, if you think of emotion as like a graph. Anger and hilarity are on this side, and then sadness is on this side, and viral things are always over here. And she always hits those marks. Now, other politicians, other videos, and other like discussions where the issues are being described, or the issues are being discussed in a way that is serious, or there's no like villain. When clearly, like whenever Elizabeth Warren is speaking about one of these issues, there's always a villain, a very clear opponent to what she's talking about, and that's why she always goes. Most of the time she goes viral, and that's why Adam Mordecai always has posts about her.
One thing we talked a bunch about, and I'll bring it over, was this companion piece to. This article is a companion piece to Noam Schreiber's article about how Hillary Clinton running for president would be, Elizabeth Warren running for president would be Hillary Clinton's worst nightmare. And they said that a key part of the chance that she could run was that she has these propensity of having viral videos that have already bonded her to the Democratic left. And this visceral connection they felt through these videos that they're able to see, and them being able to get that video at that opportune moment, but just that that poise she's able to show and that explanation of how she's able to make these complex things simple. What other advice would you have for people trying to work in this model?
Where to start? So are you showing that or not?
Yeah,
I feel like you just.
Well, it's I queued it up so it can start playing for you.
All right. Well, so I'll stand between you and the video. That's cool. So it is tricky. And what I would say, a couple of things that I would say right offhand. You mentioned Alexis's poise and also picking good lines. And having, as she was saying, having the right thing to say, sometimes it happens in the moment. Prepping the hell out of something really helps. Even if what you're going for, and what we're going for in the end, is something that looks spontaneous and like just happened and it was a conversation and whatnot. The preparation helps a lot. And that's the kind of, when you're talking about live TV like that, that's the kind of irony, I guess, if you want, or the conflict, because you have to prep to get it good, but it has to look unprepped or it does not look good. And that's a lot of why we need an organization and trainers, and why we do what we do, to try and prep people ahead of time. And also, the other piece you mentioned was, how many of us would have the, whatever gender metaphor you want to use, to call up Barney Frank and go back and forth with Jay-Z. Part of that is just being calm in that scenario. And I don't know. It is one of the most natural and most pervasive human fears, to be, first of all, to be up on stage. The research shows people would rather be eaten by a shark than have to So, and the camera is like a miniature version of that, and we all know it. When one of these things are pointed at us, it's like, and then what you're going for is to act natural, but your natural reaction to that is to freak out, and that's not what we're going for. So getting people acclimated to this, part of what it seems like we're saying here is that these are rare. Well, here is that these skills are more and more valuable going forward, and still not that common.
Yeah. And what was unique about Warren, if we stick with that case study also, is that she does seem so natural and authentic whenever she happens to be on camera. And one of the examples you cited earlier, which we can try to play in a moment, is when she gave that line about how even if you built a business and it's successful, you don't necessarily own all that. You needed the roads, you needed all these other public goods that really make that possible, which she nailed the hell out of. But then, to the extent that Obama decided to basically replicate what she said, and he butchered it, which then became the "you didn't build that" slogan, attack line that the Republicans tried to turn into their entire RNC convention theme. So if we can, let's see if we can play this for a little bit, just to get a taste of these.
My favorite part of looking at this hole, we got in this hole $1 trillion on tax cuts for the rich under George Bush. We got into this hole $2 trillion on 2 wars that we put on a credit card for our children and grandchildren to pay off. And we got into this hole $1 trillion on a Medicare drug program that A, was not paid for, and B, is 40% more expensive than it needs to be because it was a giveaway to the drug companies. So we just that's just $4 trillion right there. So part of the way you fix this problem is don't do those things. No, I'm serious. I hear all this, this is class warfare, this is whatever. No, there is nobody in this country who got rich on his own. Nobody. You built a factory out there, good for you, but I want to be clear, you moved your goods to market on the roads the rest of us paid for. Yep. You hired workers, the rest of us paid to educate. You were safe in your factory because of police forces and fire forces that the rest of us paid for. You didn't have to worry that marauding bands would come and seize everything at your factory and hire someone to protect against this because of the work the rest of us did. Now look, you built a factory and it turned into something terrific or a great idea. God bless. Keep a big hunk of it. But part of the underlying social contract is you take a hunk of that and pay forward for the next kid who comes along.
So what is especially striking to me about not only that video, but that whole genre of videos, also in that Noam Schreiber New Republic piece as well, he referred to how Elizabeth Warren's campaign had a kind of staffer that they don't usually have on campaigns, a specifically digital director who would go with her everywhere she went, would have a camera at the ready to make sure when there was this kind of moment, when she was on fire, that they'd be able to get it on tape. And that kind of video could change the entire national debate. And people are talking seriously about hopes that Elizabeth Warren might even run for president, could inspire a Howard Dean-style campaign that would create a whole new generation of digital savvy activists. And bringing it back down to earth, and I guess back to Joe, is, there are these things that we all can look for, whether we're in electoral politics, whether we're an activist, these cues of like what's really going to work well on video to achieve any kind of audience. And when you see something like that, and as you normally would go about your day-to-day curation at Upworthy, there are certain things that would strike you that said, that's a video that's going to do really well. Even if we wouldn't have known who Elizabeth Warren was, if that was just some state senator, I suspect that might be a video that would still do well on Upworthy.
Yeah.
If that had kept going, and like they just started talking about something else, and then they just ended, like it wouldn't have as much impact as it did when they were all applauding at the end and like, yeah, and then it ends. So you have to think about that, and also when I'm looking for a video, we always have a test of if you press play and you're watching and you're engaged, and then all of a sudden you're just kind of like you find yourself looking at your phone while you're listening, it's not going to go viral because it's not interesting enough.
Connecting again the movement and electoral sphere. When Elizabeth Warren, another one of her now famous viral videos was when she was had a congressional hearing with SEC regulators, and she just deadpans to the screen, to these regulators. So tell me about the last few times you took Wall Street Bank to trial. And she's like working with her papers, and these regulators are just kind of standing there just in shock, because clearly they don't do that. Why would a SEC regulator take a bank to trial? And just the humor behind that, behind this serious thing, is how it just struck this great chord. And in general, I see all of these things, between the changing nature of video that's able to drive politicians or activists. I think it comes to this notion that really the entire ecosystem we're working with is rapidly changing. The Occupy axiom that another world is possible, I really believe is to be true as more and more of our time shifts from television to these other mediums, making this whole new kind of voices possible. And with that, I wanted to give our panelists a little bit of time to any kind of closing statements, and then start our Q&A, because we have another kind of 15 minutes. So anything else you guys want to close on, or should we just move
on that point with Elizabeth Warren, I think an important part of that exchange that you were just describing, when she's all the regulators up at the desk, and she says, the thing that you just quoted, how many of you sent to jail, and no one says anything, and she's like, anyone? But so it's just good on a surface level, and people that aren't in the know, but then people within the circle of Washington, that is not allowed. You are not allowed to be a member of the Democratic Party and go after the regulators in a Democratic administration. That is considered below the belt. And so part of, I think, what's so powerful about that is it's that shock thing again. This is something outside of the norm of what we're used to. Someone is doing something that's not allowed, and she's doing it, whatever. I obviously agree with it. I'm sure maybe other people don't. But in pursuit of truth and justice. And I think that there's something there. I don't know if it's the shock or the unusualness of it, or people don't do that, but there's something to that.
Talk just really briefly about how this works on campaigns. You mentioned now that Elizabeth has this person who's walking around and taking video all the time. We've been recommending that for a few years. It's only getting easier, of course, again, because we have video on our phones. And generally, at least on our side, candidates are not that good about it, and they kind of do what has always been done. And you have a campaign manager, and they have volunteer organizers, whatever. Things are changing, and really the reason this is changing now is not because of Elizabeth Warren's inspiring example. It's because now more and more campaigns are hiring the video tracker not to follow themselves, but to follow the opponent. And so that if your opponent is getting video of you, then you need video of you too, so that when they clip it up the way one of these Project Veritas people does, that how it actually went down. And so there is now, for all the wrong reasons maybe, video tracking happening more often. But to stress, certainly in the candidate context, but also in the context of whatever kind of communication we're doing, it alarms me that we still run candidates for whom they're like, okay, I'm good and I got this and I got my funding in place and so I'm going to run. Oh, speaking in public? Well, yeah, I'll figure that out as I go on. that's the job. That's what you do, right? And you know, speaking on the phone is also the job, but there are related skills there too. But yeah, we gotta get good at that stuff. We won't.
Again, tying everything together, one notion I really thought was that the best camera is always the one you have on you. So just the fact that if you're able to take out your phone, you just keep it in your pocket, you have it either way, you're able to take that video whenever that moment strikes. Adam?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, this Elizabeth Warren video actually wouldn't do well on Upworthy. Because our main audience is the middle coast, sort of middle of the road. Not that our audience is middle coast, but just basically that it's too partisan and rah-rah. And why the Elizabeth Warren hearing video was so awesome was because she's like this really disappointed person who expects more from you. She's like, I'm confused. Why are you not doing your job? And every time I write up something of hers where she's very reasonable and understanding, it goes 3 times farther because it's reaching middle America, people who think that everybody's out to get everybody else and everyone makes politics. So like, when you can explain things in a calm and reasonable manner, in a visually compelling way with a story, it will go even way farther. And this is great for like base and getting your own people activated. But like those times where she's just nailing them with science and facts and like, what? Why did you? That doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? Those are the ones that performed well. I did one that was too shrill and it died horribly. And actually, the faces of her, you were saying the ones where she's always pointing.
Yeah.
I tend not to do those. I tend to do the ones where she's just like, I'm confused. What like those are actually the ones that tend to.
We gotta talk.
Yeah, let's do that.
With that, we're at time. Thanks so much to our great panelists, great audience, for fantastic questions. Hope everybody has a great rest of the day at Rootscamp.
Thank you.